Hello, everyone, and thank you for joining us in this installment of the Inclusively series presented by Lewis Insight and Senza Fili. Today we have Inclusively with Rakuten, Embracing Diversity and Inclusion. Our speakers today are Tareq Amin, CEO of Rakuten Mobile and Rakuten Symphony, Chris Lewis, Founding Director of Lewis Insight, and Monica Paolini, Principal at Senza Fili. We would like to encourage our audience to participate in today's conversation. Please share your comments and questions using the Q&A button at the bottom of the Zoom screen. All comments are visible to all participants, so please keep the conversation polite and respectful. And we also have enabled closed captioning for today's webinar. There should be a button at the bottom of the Zoom screen to enable that if you wish. And with that, I'll hand it over to Monica.
Thanks, Kendra. It's a real pleasure to be here, and this is our first Inclusively with a guest. We had an initial one, Chris and I, and you can watch it offline, but this is the first one, and we're really honored to have Tareq Amin from Rakuten, not just because Tareq is played such an important role, but because of the context that he's going to bring in. So what we're doing at Inclusively is to really talk about both diversity, inclusion, and there's all sorts of issues that go around with it. And nobody has an answer to all those questions. So how do we solve the issue of including everybody? But the question is, how are we doing? How are we progressing? So Inclusively is a place to discuss these topics with an open mind and see where we're going. So with that, I would like to ask Tareq to introduce himself. We know what to do, but to give us some perspective of why is inclusion and diversity important to you. So Tareq, thanks for being with us today.
Thank you, Monica. Thank you, Monica and Chris. This is probably for me a better forum, not only to talk about technology, but to talk about a topic that really matters quite a bit to me personally, and also our group as a whole. It's a really, really important topic, and I want to commend both of you about taking this and really making it public so we could speak openly about these critical issues. So I am Tareq Amin. I am the CEO of Rakuten Mobile and Rakuten Symphony. And this particular topic to me is important because if someone asks me what is an inclusive future would look like to me personally, I think maybe my simple answer would be maybe an inclusive future is a world in which accessibility to anyone is provided, no matter what is their gender, culture, ability, or lifestyle. And the reason I believe this is really important, because I think we could really make the world a better place, but because I think we will enable everyone to join the workforce without limitation. I think this is really, really a big aspiration goal. And, me personally having to go through a significant amount of challenges in my professional life as I moved from country to country, taking on big, ambitious projects. I always found it such an important thing to really think about the foundation of inclusivity as you build structure, organization to deliver on big, ambitious, audacious dreams and ideas. So, yeah, so that's, Monica, my why obviously I'm here today and why I'm glad to talk to both of you, is to really express the journeys that I personally have taken, and also what Rakuten is doing to make a difference in this critical topic.
Absolutely. When you think about it, we think sometimes of inclusivity as a minority of people, like a few of them, but inclusivity is actually addressing most of us, because we're not, and there's so much heterogeneity out there. Chris, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said, and Terry, you make a really important point, and especially for the industry that we all work within as our mainstream jobs, the telecom industry. We always talk about technology, and customer experience is measured by technology. And yet, as you rightly point out there, it's about the individual feeling as though they are part of whether it's their personal life or their business life or part of society. So where do you think we are today in terms of inclusion?
So I think Chris, if you ask me, I think especially in our industry, our vertical, I have no doubt that everybody is working hard, trying to make a difference, trying to improve, trying to build better platforms, awareness, education for all our employee base. But I want to be really honest with you, we have a long way to go. And the reality behind this, I think you've talked about one specific example. Let's take this issue around customer experience. We no doubt treat a customer as an empirical percentages point that is buried among many statistical KPIs. But sometimes I wonder if we really have an appreciation and understanding to who we are dealing with, and on whether through a chatbot communication or when someone calls customer care. This dream and journey about a true customer experience management must start with an idea of an appreciation of the people you're dealing with, their limitation, if any, their requirements, their needs. So if you ask me, I still think that, we're doing good programs, good work, but in my opinion, we're still far away from where we need to be. There's a lot of work ahead of us that we all need to take, and we all need to appreciate that the gaps are big. And once we understand that perspective and the reality where we are, I think we could take faster, quicker decision-making to improve day-to-day work environment.
I'm sure we'll come back to that, I'm sure. But I guess we need to think about, we talk about inclusion, but actually it's really about those groups who are excluded today. And obviously from being blind, I come at it from I've looked at all the different forms of disability and how you might be excluded. But we have an aging population in many countries, not all countries, but trying to embrace those people, the people who aren't connected, who either don't understand how to use the service. So I think this notion of digital first or mobile first is actually, of course, from our industry point of view, it's where we aim for, but it's dangerous because it could well exclude more people in the future.
Well, look, I mean, you look at the country I live in now, in Japan. I mean, you have a classic, maybe a use case, a example of what inclusion or exclusion might be, right? I mean, think about the population of Japan. It is a very elderly population. It is aging rapidly. There's a significant number of the population that is senior citizens. And I'll tell you what my first observation is, what you and I and maybe Monica take for granted, our ability to access mobile devices, our ability to go into smartphones and navigate through a sea of complex application. Maybe all of us find this today an easy job. But if you go to an elderly person, you would discover that their grasp and understanding is a lot different than you and I might look at a technology problem. So I think what we first have to come to an appreciation with is to recognize that we all come with different abilities. We all come with different talents and different things that we could contribute to improve overall society in terms of how we interact and work and cohabitate with each other. So for me in Japan, it started with an appreciation that, dealing with senior citizens, of course, is going to have a very different point of view than dealing, let's say, with younger generation people in Japan. So, and it's important for us to recognize this so we could tailor our solutions, our products according to, the capability of the individuals, the organization, and the people that we're dealing with. So no doubt, Chris, I think this is a really, really important point that sometimes we talk about we need to include everybody, but let's also understand in telecom who is excluded from our journey. And I think digitization is a really, really interesting one to think through, because they will certainly be a segment of people that I think will be challenged by embracing new technology. There's no doubt.
Well, and the point of the technology is really to be able to serve people. So this is actually our goal. And also from a profit point of view, you just have a bigger market because you just want to include everybody. So, but at the same time, let's say the metaverse that everyone talks about. When you look at what the use cases, what you see is the ideal, like it's a teenager or a professional, whatever. You don't even see them. So is it the kind of thing that even when we start designing the services, designing the devices, we are already targeting a very specific part of the market. That is the most sexy one, but not the larger necessarily.
Right,
so how
right.
can we change that?
Well, look, I mean, it starts, I think you've talked about it. It starts by look, the reality is if you ask many product companies today, how many of them take inclusivity as a design language in the early part of product development and product design? And maybe my point of view, to give you some perspective reality, I would say maybe today it's seldom. Not because they are evil or they really have a bad intention. I just think, you know, the level of awareness and education around understanding that we are different, not just in shape, color, but in everything. We are different and we have to accept those differences that come with us. So I think the first thing that we have to do is take this decisiveness when we talk about not necessarily what programming language you use to write your application in, but actually understanding that from the early days, if products needs to get built, we need to start thinking about the product of inclusivity by design from the beginning. How does the UX looks like? So maybe as both of you are aware, we are in an unbelievable inflection point where a technology could really make a big difference to the desire of inclusivity. And for me, let me give you a technology. It is not necessarily metaverse, right? I'll tell you something that is more within our grasp that I think is a game changer. And I think it will change the paradigm of how we build future products. So let me talk about voice AI as an example. So I have seen incredible demos of the spinoff of OpenAI, this new chatbot AI that is coming about, that looks real to me. It looks conversational. And, you know, such technology, if you really think about today, we all got addicted on using our thumbs, our hands, our fingers to navigate our touch screen on the device. Now, the question that really is coming to my mind, and I'm challenging my team in, I said, wouldn't it be easier if I could speak the same way we're talking, as if we're talking on Zoom today, and the AI is going to be capable to listen, interpret, act in a human way? It's just happening, and it's happening faster than I thought it was. But I also think this voice AI is a beautiful use case for inclusivity. So now, regardless of your age, gender, disability, or your liking, as long as you're able to converse, maybe that is one idea of positive change that could happen. You know, I'm sure there's many other things that we could do, but I would tell you, I would go to the basics of always to think inclusivity by product design before I start thinking about the code base, the architecture, cloud native or not. All these become secondary to the beginning of the problem.
So it takes me back, Tareq, to work. I did work on computational linguistics, but 40 years ago, back at university. This was about machine translation, so taking language in and translating. But there was always this thing about the way we've evolved as humans to communicate. You know, we started off grunting and gesturing, and then we created languages, and then we created scripts, and then we've computerized it, and we typeset it, and we've sort of come full circle now, and we're now perhaps not grunting, but we're gesturing and speaking into systems. And you know, the smart speaker in my mind changes the personal environment so much. You know, I use it. Actually, my favorite way of checking it is, I won't use the word because there's one sitting to my right here, but because being blind, I don't always see words written down. So I say, hey, how do you spell whatever the word is? And they just read. And so it's access. That you're right. It's opening up the access for people to do things the way that people want to do it, and not constraining them by the technologies to do it. And I think that you're quite right about the designing it from scratch to include it. But of course, we interact with so many different products. You know, I went to buy a new hob for the kitchen, you know, and I went to the people and said, how accessible is it? Will it talk to me? Oh, no. You know, well, what about it's a conduction one. So you put, how do I know where to put the pan on the surface? Oh, well, you could put some little bump dots on it. Well, that's not real. The speech ability, I've got a great coffee machine, but there's 5 reasons it doesn't work sometimes. But I have to go through a routine of emptying the water, checking all the cycles. But there's a little panel on the front with lights on it, which I can't see. It would be so easy to have a speech output. So I think the you're absolutely right from a design point of view, but we have to do it. But there's so many touch points. So within, if you think of it from a Rakuten point of view, you touched already upon the devices, but think about all the systems that people will touch through the course of interacting with you, and in fact, you designing services. Can we build it everywhere? I mean, it's a long journey, but
yeah, I mean, I think, look, let me tell you, this is a really interesting thing. You know, the part that I really love about my job, and I think I've talked about this, you know, in many of my keynotes. You know, of course, I'm excited about the technology and the aspects that we're doing in both Rakuten Mobile and Rakuten Symphony. But to be very frank with you, the excitement that I have to the technology is secondary to the enthusiasm I have for what we have built. So I do truly believe we have built an amazing culture of inclusivity. It's not perfect, but I think it fundamentally, if you come to our organization, you know, and the reason that I really liked a lot of facets of my job is I was given this ability to almost bring this orchestra together. And looking and understanding that, you know, I always thought, even from my personal experience, when I immigrated to the United States at a very young age, I felt and I understood what it meant to be included in society, to be included in being a productive human being, taking and really focusing on advancing my career, education, and so on. So moving into the US, it was very easy for me to feel like I belonged. And then immediately, this to me was the foundation of my early days on the business learnings. So as long as a business and an environment continue to spread awareness to every single employees, and we really hone in and try to talk to people in a normal way, it does not need to be on a fancy scripted way, where we talk openly and say, you know, to our employees, what do you think inclusivity means, right? And of course, both of you know, sometimes the definition of inclusivity is also not very well understood. You know, so I think the problem statement always have to start by this awareness, and awareness about our differences, awareness about, you know, respecting what each and every person could bring to the bigger picture, meaning in the case of business, bringing better profits. But I do think through inclusivity, a business could be far better than a business that is really just running in a way that this doesn't bring all the facets of culture, religion, disability, and so on into the way that they build the organization. So within Rakuten, we have taken some really big decisive steps. You know, we spend a lot of energy, even though, by the way, within Japan, you know, the government here does a lot of great things to support people with disability to come to work, but we want to be much higher than what government percentage ratio, just so we could say, hey, check mark, we have met this government threshold for hiring people with disability. We don't really think about it that way. And to be honest with you, I almost would tell you, at least for me personally, when you come meet me, I don't really, I mean, I don't want to sound incompassionate about this, but almost to say, I appreciate and I respect the disabilities you have or other things you might or might not have, but those are secondary to our conversation.
Sure.
I treat you like I'm treating an effective, productive member of my staff, and I'm here to facilitate maybe the additional support you need. But beyond that, I want to give you the respect that all the other team members that I have deserve. So giving you this feeling that I'm maybe treating you differently just because you have something that is different than others, I also believe maybe that is not the right thing for me. And giving the individual the respect they deserve and give them the freedom to operate and the support they need, maybe is good enough to bring encouragement into my employee base.
Do you think the more we're moving from a very hardware centric industry in telecoms to much more software centric? Do you think the software centric world makes it easier to be inclusive in terms of your internal design? And, you know, I say bringing someone in with the ability to code. I often talk about contact centers where you could use in fact, it reminded me recently that blind people used to be employed for doing the old Stravager exchanges in offices, moving the things around, you know, and of course now it'd be quite easy to have a blind person or a deaf person working on the chatbot side of things. Do you think the software centricity helps?
Oh, 100%, 100%. I mean, I'll tell you that we are certainly, look, I mean, I think all of us have been tracking and we're reading some big technology inflection points coming into our life. So we talked today about voice AI as being really happening and happening in a meaningful way. You know, quantum computing coming up much faster than I ever thought. And the intersection of both bring a really interesting possibility. So let me just give you a specific example. Most recently on GitHub, this product now have something called Copilot. I mean, it is terrifying what is happening. It is almost having, through voice AI, the ability to write blocks of code, right? So I think technology now and the software world, if used properly, could be a massive enabler for inclusivity, not the opposite. I really think that, you know, and we're not talking, by the way, about years from now. I'm talking about, I believe, 6 to 8 months, you're going to start seeing a lot of this AI in a meaningful way being employed to do product development, for example, right? I mean, so I think such products, such tool chains, such tool sets are an enablement that we never had in the early days with hardware, right? So I think a lot is going to change, and regardless of any issues someone might face, I think the technology and the softwareization, if you look at telco, I think it's going to be a really, really big enablement for inclusivity.
Yeah, now, you know, as you mentioned before, I mean, we basically don't need to wait for the metaverse. We don't need to wait for 6G. We don't need it. We need 5G. Right. You know, we already, actually, it seems like we have, in a way, more technology than we need to be using. So the question is that, like, you know, you're going to have somebody developing software. How can you get them to have the same awareness that you have? Because, you know, they need to sort of think it through. As I said, they need to have it as a designer applications to services. Yep. How can you get them?
Monica, I think really the key for me here, look, again, I think if I go to our, let's say if I as a leader go and outsource this important initiative and say, HR, this is your job, go and just do this because I feel it's the right thing to do. Well, then I could tell you nothing will change. We just keep talking about it because it sounds great to the industry that we're discussing an important topic like inclusivity in the context of telecom. But the reality is, I do believe every manager and every leader, regardless of your title, position, and stature, should really understand that inclusivity, diversity, all these words are not just necessarily got created because they're just nice to talk about. That makes us all feel good, but there is actually practical way of how to spread awareness and into the organization. So, you know, for me, having structured workshops with our employees, for example, and the structured awareness training that is not necessarily being scripted through textbooks, right? I mean, I think it's okay to talk just in an open dialogue, and it does not need to be. I call it, not that I don't like HR, by the way. I just don't think it needs to be, here's a guidebook and here's how you handle inclusivity. I think it needs to be a bit more open-hearted discussion, right? Because if some of us that maybe have been blessed in life and we don't have any challenges on how we approach our life, I think every once in a while you need to pause, appreciate, be thankful about what you have, but also maybe open your mind that others are not as blessed as you. Now, those discussions and the million things that an employee have to accomplish, maybe this is not in top of mind. And so, you know, the job that we do constantly, and it's not something that, hey, you know, this you do once a month. For me in Rakuten, this is something that we drive in a significant way, this employee awareness. We conduct surveys, we conduct workshops. And this is not about, hey, how does technology solve a problem? This is about how mindset, people, organization are starting to change all the way from the bottom up, top down, bottom up, to take on this big challenge, because it is really, really a big challenge that we have to address.
And it's the difficulty is, and obviously, as you know, as a blind person, I come across this a lot during my life. But the trouble is, you've got to have enough people in your organization who represent all the different categories of disability.
Right.
And let's face it, there's very physical disability, like lack of eyesight or hearing or physical impairment, but there's so much invisible disability that we need to take account of. And generally you find what's happened in the big organizations, especially in the telecom world, you find someone has a child or a relation who's got a hearing problem, and that gets pushed through the agenda. But we've got to find a way of building it. And I'll tell you one of the other challenges, Tareq, which is especially with the elderly population, is that the disability, it's not one disability, right? So I know in my early 60s, I'm beginning to have a hearing problem, right? So I'm starting to engage with the hearing aid community about what's the best device for me to use. I've suddenly found out that almost none of them work, the apps that they have to work with your phone, because you want to be able to manipulate it, almost none of them allow for somebody who can't see and can't hear very well, because it's been developed in totally separate silos.
Yep.
So there's a real challenge there in terms of the culture, the awareness is, I totally agree.
Yeah,
It's so
Chris,
important.
I think you've hit a really important point, which is I think for you to appreciate what a product might or might not look like, I think having enough representation of various group members, and and I'm talking about diversity in every aspect, right, including disability and other things that a person might have. I think that's the only way for you to start to appreciate what are the really requirements that someone needs to build products against that meets maybe a general population, not a specific population demand and needs.
But at the same time, that's very important, but is that sufficient in the sense that there is some understanding, like for instance, if you're somebody who is blind or doesn't see very well, there are, somebody that can see well, you don't really understand it, and you cannot just have everybody blind or whatever, right? So we need to also provide them some sort of education, if you wish, to try to understand what are the specific requirements that you have to meet. In the same way that you need to have a latency requirement for gaming, you want to have some requirements. And are we there? Is this something we can do to be more sort of specific?
Yeah, if you ask me, I'm still, I'm really happy about the discussions that we've been having as an industry as a whole around this topic, but I still think that we're nowhere close to where we need to be. I mean, this is a reality. I look at, I have a very large set of products that my team build, but if you ask me today, how many of them you completely have thought about the different verticals that represent maybe the collective society that you're going to have to sell these products to? And the truth is very little. Our mind has been focused on solving a smaller problem rather than thinking about the bigger picture, right? And I understand the challenges for this, but I will tell you that ultimately, to solve this issue, I don't think any CEO of any company could just say, here's my will, go do it. I just think that there need to be this evangelist culture that gets created within, because we even on this call today, not everybody have answers. Everybody have opinions and thoughts and ideas of what we should do. But for me, I focus on maybe the basic things that I thought I could do. I could influence hiring decision in my organization. That I think is within my capability as an executive officer in both Rakuten Mobile and Symphony. I could dictate things that I know it makes sense to do. So and it's not just about a quota per se. This is not just about a quota. They understand why diversity is important. They understand why inclusivity is important. So I feel like I'm happy about that journey of the construct of diversity in every facet I have enabled. And it's now becoming not only my choice, it's becoming my team choice on how they pick the right members, the right leadership, the right gender, and so on, in the construct of the organization design. And then, of course, with this, the hope and the optimism, as you have now a diversified point of view and opinion that belongs to your organization, some in your leadership team, your decision-making is going to change, right? So that's why I think fundamentally that's what we believe that we need to focus on. And let me add one additional thing that I think also was really good that we did. Within Rakuten Group, we always, by the way, every year we hire people with disability, but by purpose, by the way. But at the same time, we also thought that to provide people with disabilities specific on-job training, we needed a specific sets of expertise that Rakuten actually did not have internally. So we created a specialized subsidiary called the Rakuten Socio Business, and basically it works with various Rakuten businesses to ensure disabled individuals are empowered to play an active role in a division day to day. So this was, I think, is a good thing that we have taken as an initiative to really focus on skilling and training and so on. But frankly speaking, it's this also subsidiary could also be used for training maybe my elderly workforce, if you will, people that are somehow are not in tune and in touch with new digital world, right? And that struggle that many people are going to have. We have elderly workforce in telco, and how do you upskill them? How do you move them into a 21st century digitized platform? It's something we also have to think through, right? So, and it is part of our inclusivity challenge.
Can I turn?
Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Can we go back to you? We talked a little bit about customer experience before. I look, excuse me. I look at the topic of customer experience and how I interact, how my elderly mother at 89 interacts with the telecom industry, and the frustration of being pushed into an app environment and not being pushed away from using traditional voice. How is, and given especially the Rakuten example, what you built, how is customer experience? What are you looking at as the KPIs today? Do you see different channels of usage? Is it all inevitably moving towards digital? How do you keep that broad base? And I guess and just to overlay it, the AI question as well. So how does the technology allow us to provide more focused customer experience around the individuals, given identity and privacy and all those things? There are issues in there.
Yeah. So if I give you a practical example, let's take our customer support 3.5 years ago. I'll be really honest with you. Our response rate when you complain about something was horrendous. We were not really prepared, and we were not ready. We would spend a lot of time maybe on a voice call and not being able to navigate through, proper FAQ to answer your questions properly. And, from the early days, I recognized that we need a different platform and different systems. I did not want, honestly speaking, to say, Chris have called and his percent drop call is 0.4%. What does that really mean? Honestly, it means nothing. When you tell me you have dropped 0.4% of your calls, well, maybe one of those calls was critical. Maybe you're talking to a family member, a banker. See, this context was never there. Context about awareness of situation and awareness of individual completely deviated what I would think a true customer experience management would look like versus what we do today. So then we started now the investment, and this was a journey. And boy, Chris, it was a journey to invest into voice AI. Now, it is one challenge to say you could speak to a voice AI, it could understand the context of what you want, and then the response it could give you is also need to be tuned and analyzed. So our effectiveness in voice AI was as low as 33%, meaning if you go to our voice AI, I'm sure, Chris, you'll be super frustrated 3.5 years ago. You'll be like, I give up. And we were not good at it. We were not necessarily that the technology was not good. We were not spending enough quality time on optimizing the call models, especially that we have to maintain this in Japanese and bringing better awareness where the AI understand more of what you need and what you're asking for. It cannot be, I'm sorry, I can't understand. The level of frustration you'll go through, we have to address. So today, we've improved from 33% effectiveness in proper responses that our AI provide to 77%. And this is a really, really healthy journey. If you ask me, we need to be operating at like 90+% for me to tell you that our voice AI meets the requirements of any person. We're not there today, and you know, we need to do a lot more. But I think in tomorrow's context, in tomorrow's world, I think this AI will only be successful if a regular customer doesn't even know they're talking to an AI.
Yeah, but
You know,
by the way, there's a Google have got a project with a bunch of other companies now to use AI and the like for people with speech defects as well.
exactly.
So the ability. So of course we think about normal people normally speaking, but accents within I even think within the UK, if you ever come across a Scouse accent or a Geordie accent, they're pretty tough to pick up, right? Let alone with any other issue. So yeah, I think that you're absolutely right. And what we do, and of course as a technology telecoms analyst, when I think about customer experience, I'm thinking, okay, is there a text here, a text messaging thing here? Is it a chat bot? Do we go back to email because email is easier for some people, or do we use regular voice? But I'm falling into the same trap of actually, well, that's the technology approach. Whereas the real question should be, if my 89-year-old mum wants to speak to BT, who's a service provider, then she should be able to do that. And if it's if it's via voice AI to begin with, and I think that I agree.
I mean,
So
Chris, think about these extensions you're talking about. So regardless of what you use at your house, just imagine, and it's all doable today. We're not talking about things that we cannot do. Whatever smart speaker you use at the house, so just imagine if that speaker is somehow interconnected, with our platforms and the carrier platforms in the back end. Now you could be conversational anywhere and everywhere you go into the house. And I think these are the investments that we have to do on the voice AI itself. I honestly would tell you, in telecom, it's like, let's just put it this way, compared to what I'm seeing in other areas, we have a great opportunity to differentiate, really great opportunity. But we need to really be cognizant that the AI that we use today, I call it extremely robotic and very inflexible on what it needs, what it needs to become to meet the requirement of every customer. So, and that's what I'm focusing my energy on, is drive the right technology implementation to meet the requirements that you need and make our system very open via any API. Tomorrow it will happen. It will absolutely happen that these smart speakers we could integrate with.
Yeah. Well, isn't here another issue is like the training set. So as I was going to say, so you want to train on people that have speech impairments, accents. I know that problem. So, but also, if, our mothers call in, they're going to have a different type of question than a teenager or somebody. So we need to also think of the training. And like I said, that's where the awareness comes in, because the technology can help, because you can train AI on anything, but you need to give them. So, people talk about all the biases of AI. With AI, we know what the bias is, so we can fight the bias. So I think that's where there is a lot of, I see a lot of opportunity.
The one thing maybe I'll share with you, and let me just preface it by saying, we have extreme privacy rules in Rakuten. So the part that I'm going to describe to you now, it's under the premise that we don't do anything that would violate any privacy laws, but we have a system that we call customer DNA. And this is really, really interesting. The group as a whole has a massive ecosystem in Japan, specifically. So we know the touch points a customer uses to purchase products and goods across 71 services in Rakuten. Now, the reason we created customer DNA is to try to, I would say, train the AI to understand who you are. Now, once you understand who the person is, there's a lot of tree decision making that could happen, and it becomes really, really easy as such. So this customer DNA project started, almost 8-9 years ago, and it's becoming the heart of our business today, and giving us extreme critical insight for us to appreciate who our customers are. So
and Tareq, this is across the whole of the Rakuten group. Perhaps
it's
worth you just explaining the breadth of the group, because we're not just talking mobile.
So imagine today we're talking about, Rakuten has the largest credit card company in Japan. one of the largest online banking, and the fintech businesses are doing remarkably well, the e-commerce and so on. So anytime you come to our systems, you are interacting with common ID, right? So across 71 services, but what we try to understand is there are things about age, demographics, disabilities, all the information that if you volunteer to provide, we capture in this customer DNA. And the objective is, in the future, if you call us, maybe we would have a better idea on what are you calling most likely to discuss? What are the issues that concerns you the most? What are the products that makes you, you consume more from the group companies as a whole? But I do think that we need to Monica's point is why I like this customer DNA. It provides a smart characterization about the customer, and it provides it in a very smart way to know how do we tailor our AI to who calls and what's the reason they're calling. So this level of technology, I think it's safe because I'm not selling your data to anybody. I'm just anonymizing everything anyway. I'm just using it to improve AI and training model. And of course, all of this has to come with consent from our customers to allow us to collect any of such data.
But I guess we need to also, at some point, be able to communicate the advantages of that, because a lot of people are really scared of, the privacy issue, which clearly is an issue, but it's a trade-off.
It's true, but Monica, do you not? And I always think of this of going into a retail store. Most people love being sold to, right? They love the appreciation of you as an individual. They love being proposed something which is specific to you and will suit you. So when we get to that level of service through all these automation and AI, I think people will appreciate it because they get something back. The reason we like the Facebooks and Googles and what we do, the reason we give them so much data is because we get something back. So I think that there is a good payback.
If I look at myself as a customer, I'll tell you, as long as I'm informed, I just want to know what people are doing with my data. As long as I'm informed and I am part of the decision-making process, I think that's all what I could ask for, because there are certain things, especially like, let's say on my devices, very well, sometimes when you install the device, it asks you, hey, do you want to share this or that with developers? And this is a choice. So I say, yes, no problem, share. Yeah. And as such, I think the AI, as much as we talk about it, I'm still really, honestly, I look at it from a positive, optimistic point of view, what it will bring to us to benefit our society. I don't think about the negative aspect of it, but I do think this AI needs to become more intelligent. So, it's almost like feeding it the food it needs, and the food it needs is behavioral data, right? And shopping.
It is, but Tareq, I'll tell you from the excluded community point of view, shall we say, there is a big concern about AI, built-in bias into AI. So the training, I totally agree, the training issue is absolutely critical, because if what we do, and whatever we call the future, the metaverse, whatever, if we're simulating the way we do things now, that will build in a bias, the bias that exists in society and business today. So we have to be really careful with that. Yeah.
Well, but there is also AI as a technology allows you to evaluate and assess the bias. So it is potentially biased, but you can also identify the bias and correct for it. So as long as you're aware of it, and I think that, as I said, it's a transparency in all this. Acknowledge that there is a potential for a bias, acknowledge you're working on it. And then, I think that's really important.
Yeah.
Agreed.
So Tareq, where do you think where are the easy hits? You talked about the workforce and changing it. It sounds like you've got some great things in progress there. And because you're driving this from the top, that's sort of internal side and employment opportunity. And on the customer side, by the way, the other important thing to mention is that there's a big economic uplift here, because we're going to bring more people into the world of being connected and doing services.
Look, let me give you. I have something very, very specific. Let me give you the specific case for Rakuten Mobile. So let's say one category of, maybe I don't want to say excluded, but let's just say maybe the path to include them maybe is not as simple, especially as we look at smartphone and digitization. Let us look at the elderly workforce, for example, or the elderly as in senior citizens. It is, of course, my objective and my desire to have all these senior citizens become Rakuten mobile customers and subscribers. So if you ask me, there is a low-hanging fruit that could be done. And we've taken something really interesting. Look, we've taken, think about the Android itself as an operating system. There is tremendous capabilities that exist in the technology today without huge amount of investment to change both the voice and the UX of the device itself to cater for the elderly population, if you will. And in that context, in Japan, a lot of the elderly population are just very happy and used to the idea of what I call traditional flip phones, right? For me, I could never imagine using a flip phone anymore. But if you guys recall, I mean, back in the day, the Motorola Razr phone that was out there, I mean, it's almost like that style of devices that they still use. So, for us, I looked at this and said, we should have a senior citizen team. So we created actually a senior citizen team. And the idea behind this is to create a formation of a team that would behave and think. And it's also have inclusion, meaning it has elderly people part of this organization to think about the requirement, need, and product specification of elderly people to join Rakuten Mobile. So I say this is the construct where I would say, this is just one vertical. We have to do a lot more. But we started doing this, and the idea of creating a dedicated, specific team with clear business goals and objective, it's a win-win for everybody. We win as in mobile business. We increase our revenue. That's great. But I also think that we bring a part of society that maybe people thought, okay, these people maybe would not like to learn the new things, but we're finding actually quite the contrary. That you just need to have a bit of patience in explaining all this new technology to some of them.
Indeed.
Hold on. I would like to remind the audience that there is no Q&A at the end. So if you want to ask any questions, just go ahead and ask them. You're very quiet. We can talk for Tareq for hours, but it's great to hear from you as well.
So Tareq, Monica mentioned the metaverse earlier on, and whatever that happens to become. And I was in one of the 6G labs down in one of the universities here, and the professor was showing me a doctor doing a remote patient diagnostic on an elderly person in a care home, right? And I love this. I love this scenario because there's so many elements of our industry that come to play, but it's also so relevant to it. So just with your crystal ball hat on, if you can have a crystal ball hat, are there things like that the more embedded into healthcare and other things that you think?
I mean, look, let me give you my view, because it also touches very well the topic that we're into. Another technology aspect is this metaverse, and let me give you my perspective. And this is Tareq's opinion, doesn't represent Rakuten or anything like that. So let me give you my honest feedback. So I bought the latest Meta headgear, right? And I really wanted to understand with complete open mind to what is the possibility of this technology. Now, the truth is, I think metaverse is inevitable, and it has a great potential, amazing potential to change our life for the better. The question is it a technology that will be ready 5 years from today or 10 years from today? That's still for debate. For me personally, I think honing in metaverse into a specific use cases that you could count on that actually will make a meaningful difference could provide a faster, quicker opportunity to embrace this technology. Today, I think of metaverse as a boil an ocean strategy. It will do everything. And I'm sorry to tell you, you will never find me in metaverse today more than 15 minutes. I tried. And I consider myself to be really, really tech savvy. The problem statement for me is this killer app that mandates that I have to be into that world is still not very apparent to me. Now, if you look at the industries in front of us, I mean, I could tell you there are two clear opportunities where metaverse could absolutely dominate and makes a difference. In the post-COVID era, if we focus on metaverse to say, we're going to enable a new hybrid work environment now, using metaverse as an enablement, well, that's it. And then knock this use case out of the park, knock it out. And knock it out with the idea that the product and the tool have been designed to allow any individual, regardless of disability, regardless of gender, whatever it is, they're able to use this technology to connect with their office colleagues and employees and do it just marvelously. I think that could have been really a big thing for you know, acceleration of acceptance of metaverse. And then the second thing you've hit on is, I think in the future, the opportunities around healthcare is just beautiful in healthcare. And I look at it, you know, from a perspective and a point of view, is lack of healthcare support, let's say in rural villages, rural parts of the world. I mean, the ability to really make an impact will become meaningful. So you know, for me, the jury is still out, to be very honest with you. And it's going to be a bit of time. I have no doubt we will live there one day, but I don't know if it's 5 or 10 years from today.
But you know, there's one area that obviously with my particular background, that the idea that we talk about digitally twinning factories, and we can learn and simulate in the way we've done simulation and computing for years. But I think there's an opportunity there to simulate disability. So one of my questions whenever anyone pitches the metaverse to me is like, in the metaverse, can my digital twin see? Because there's no reason why not. Why should I be modeled as a blind person? I want to go and play a game as a sighted person, you know, and run around shooting or whatever you're driving or whatever you do. And I think, but then there's another issue there. So we're modeling and learning how people with different disabilities behave in this parallel world, you know. And then on top of that, then actually the ability for my digital twin, who can see in this metaverse, to feed information back to me about saying, actually, the restaurant you want to go to is 5 paces ahead, and you go left to the door, and then you're in the table, and your friends are in the far right-hand corner. You know, putting all of these pieces together, I find very exciting as a, you know, but it brings so many different disciplines together. I think this is the issue. The metaverse is boiling the ocean, but it's also thinking about, dare we say, a more inclusive society and business model for the future. And if we have all the parts together and we design inclusively from scratch, and there's some really good work being done on this sort of academic inclusive design front, where this lovely notion that, you know, in the past we've always designed for the center of the market, for the, you know, the midpoint, whereas actually if we design for the edge, for the people with different disabilities, you know, with different requirements, they say we design for the edge, we get the center for free, because all of these use cases will include the core use case anyway.
Correct.
So I think there's some really interesting things.
Look, I mean, I think to a certain extent, Chris, when we talk about the virtual world, in a way, you know, even both you and me, there are certain things that we both need and require, irrespective of our differences in our ability. Like, for example, if you really consider that some of the new technology that are being enabled for your senses, right? Like the ability to have your finger like somehow touch and feel things where into this virtual world. Well, we never had this before, right? So I think there's a lot of very, very cool things that are being worked on. I just hope that, you know, as hundreds of billions of dollars of investment is going into the creation of the metaverses across different platforms, different companies, that what we talked about earlier into the conversation today is starting from the product design, always think inclusivity first. So as you said, you take, you know, the not just the niche area, but you start looking at a general market approach. I'm optimistic because I see a lot of very, very cool things happening in this world. And that's why I think long-term, it is no doubt in my mind, it's a game changer. The question is, well, what does that time looks like for us to be really into that?
And also just to put it in context for people, you know, the way we consume and create content as individuals, you know, my ability to read content now is staggering compared to 20 years ago. Every day I get a text feed which is read out to me. You know, audiobooks are available pretty much the same time printed books. So content, video obviously is not of particular interest to me, but I want to hear it and have it audio described, and people want captioning if they've got hearing issues. So I think you're right. I think so many of the pieces are there in place. And it is this awareness, as you rightly said, building it within an organization, representation, making sure the customer experience actually reaches out in a way the customer wants to be reached out to. So I think that's changing it a lot. Yeah. Monica, how are we doing for time?
Yeah, we have a few minutes, and I think that sort of following up, for instance, like you have closed captions, so you have just a different way to use the same context. It used to be like, for instance, on Zoom, something that you have to pay for, something separate. Now it's built in. So I guess it's going to be a gradual process. So we shouldn't just be waiting for the metaverse to suddenly appear. I don't think that that's going to happen, but there is a lot that we can start doing today. That in fact we are doing today. So actually, Tareq, I would like to ask when you look at Rakuten, I mean, I'm always amazed, how much diversity you already have in your company. When you look at others, what is your perception? Are we all, as an industry, are we doing enough? Or what is that?
I've honestly told you my opinion. I think as an industry, there is no doubt that the last decade we have really taken a decisive step forward to talk about the right things. For me personally, even within Rakuten context, I just think that the gap is still large. So we need to do more. Honestly speaking, we need to start thinking about, really ensuring that our employees are engaged into the dialogue and really starting to talk to them in a common language about the definition of inclusivity. So we all could see it from different point of view, but we also have common objectives and goals to address the market as a whole. So I'm happy about certain parts about our industry and what we're doing, but I want to see us do a lot more, including from my own team and what we're planning to do. So I think now it's I seriously look very, very carefully about the construct of my organization for a specific reason. As we approach maybe the conclusion of our talk today, let me give you my learning journey in life. I found it to be probably my epiphany came through by appreciation of what I could personally learn from the differences that I have with others, and regardless what those differences could be. So whether you're a female, male, regardless of your gender, sexuality, disability, all these things I somehow divorce out of my mind. And they don't mean a whole lot, but what start to mean is the conversation and the engagement around, disabilities and diversity has become an important topic for me personally. And as thus, I take this really, really personal journey and mission that all of us have to support this and support the foundation that is needed to do the right change in this topic.
Brilliant. Well, we really appreciate you joining us. Good, your leadership in the industry and then taking this on board as well is very much appreciated. Monica?
Yes, absolutely. No, and that's great. And I think it was great to have such an open conversation. So I have to confess that we had a list of topics, but we didn't actually follow it. And I made it so much, I think, more interesting, hopefully for all of you in the audience. And certainly for me, it was a great opportunity.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you so much, Tareq, for taking part.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Pleasure. Thank you, man. Take care.
Senza, back to you.
Okay, great. Well, that will conclude our webinar for today. Thanks again to our audience, and thank you to Rakuten for joining us. A video and transcript of this webinar will be made available soon on the sensafili.com website, and you can also access the first installment of the Inclusively series also on the Senza Fili website. Thank you again, and we look forward to seeing you at future events.